What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and a very special video where I'm going to go through my favorite film from 10 different genres. Now, this is a challenge that's currently going around the movie community on YouTube, where one person does this video, lists their favorite films from each of these genres, and then at the end chooses up to 7 other channels to take on the challenge. And this is going to be especially fun for me as I mainly cover new releases on my channel, and I've been wanting to talk about older films a bit more as there's so much to discuss when it comes to film, and it was hard to narrow this down as there are so many movies I really do enjoy. But the 10 I picked I am excited to talk about. The genres I will be discussing are action, adventure, animation, comedy, comic book, drama, horror, sci-fi, romance, and western. Now, before we begin, I want to thank Shawn from Lost in the Reel for tagging me in this. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend going to subscribe to him. He's a great critic and an all-around great guy. He's been incredibly supportive of my channel, so please show your support to him by subscribing. Now, for my list, the way I'm going to do this is start with the most recently released film and work my way backwards to the oldest film on here. It doesn't need to be done this way, but I just thought it would be fun. So, with that being said, let's jump right into the list. So, I'm starting with comic book, and for this, we're going to start with a movie that I actually already have a formal review of on this channel.
Well, there's plenty more if she wants.
She's fine.
Logan is my pick for favorite comic book movie, and it's a film that I've grown to love upon rewatching it. I think had you asked me even just last year, I may have given a different answer for this, because I always thought Logan was great, but I've really come to appreciate it more when I discussed it for a review series I did on the X-Men films last year. Now, there have been a lot of comic book movies that tried to go for the same dark feel that the Dark Knight trilogy did, and ultimately missed the mark. But I feel Logan nails what a lot of those other films attempted to do. It's a very serious film with its fair share of heartbreaking moments, but it's not overly depressing or too bleak. As much as our main characters get beaten down here, there is a sense of hope by the end of it. And the film is also consistently engaging and incredibly thrilling. The fight scenes are expertly choreographed, and they can be pretty brutal too, with director James Mangold rarely holding back, really going all in on the film's R rating. And the amount of depth given to each of these characters is wonderful, brought to life especially by some standout performances from Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. On top of that, the film also doesn't necessarily just function as a comic book movie, but also as a tribute to film itself, drawing influences from many genres such as westerns and film noir. Mangold's love of film is worn heavily on this film's sleeve, and it's all interwoven with an emotional, exciting story that showcases Wolverine at his absolute best. Next up is Western, which Logan could have easily qualified for as well, in my view. Now, Westerns aren't as prominent as they once were, with their heyday being between the 30s and the 60s, and I do like a lot of Westerns from that time period, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Wild Bunch, and High Noon, and so on. But while we don't get them as often now, when we do get them, they usually leave a lasting impression, and you can certainly say that with this pick.
Y'all getting any rain up your way?
What way would that be?
I seen you was from Dallas.
What business is it of yours? Where I'm from? Friendo?
No Country for Old Men isn't necessarily my favorite Coen Brothers movie of all time, but it's certainly close to the top. This is another film that tends to be pretty grim, and it's by far one of the most straightforward films from the directing duo, who tend to mostly do dark comedies or dramas with a little bit of a comedic edge to them. And this is a film that manages to feel both minimalistic, yet have so much going on at the same time. Not every scene's accompanied by a score, with the dialogue having this very quiet delivery about it, and not every moment's exactly the most action-packed. Yet the Coens do a great job of making each scene feel like a nail-biter, even when they don't immediately come across that way. It's a chase movie, but not every scene feels like a traditional chase sequence. It's just, once you meet the film's villain, Anton Chigurh, played expertly by Javier Bardem, and you know he's involved with retrieving this money that our protagonist, played by Josh Brolin, has, you're constantly on the edge of your seat, praying this man doesn't get his hands on this guy, even when he's not necessarily nearby per se. It's filled with some of the Coen brothers' quirky character interactions, but as I said, it's a mostly straightforward film, telling a brilliantly paced story, and it's gorgeously shot, with Roger Deakins' cinematography being a sight to behold. Though, I will say, while this is the only Coen brothers movie to win Best Picture at the Oscars, just about their entire filmography is worth checking out, as they are truly some of the best in the business, in my view. Next up is animation, and this should have felt like a tough choice because I was a big Disney fan growing up, and I love a lot of their movies, most of which are viewed as classics, and there are plenty of other studios that offer their own share of quality films, from DreamWorks, Studio Ghibli, Aardman, Laika, and more. So it leaves so many choices of excellent films, but Pixar easily wins this one, and it's the film that kicked things off for them.
And I can fly.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
You can't.
Can. I tell you, I could fly around this room with my eyes closed.
Okay then, Mr. Lightbeer, prove it.
I grew up with Toy Story, and it's remained not just at the top of my favorite animated movies, but it's also just one of my favorite movies of all time. Period. I absolutely adore all these characters, from Woody to Buzz, Ham, Rex, Mr. Potato Head, and so on. Honestly, you can easily make the case for any of the 4 Toy Story movies as being the best in my view, because I find the series to be excellent as a whole, as they all hit a lot of the same themes about growing up and finding meaning in your life. The first always resonated the most with me though, partially due to the nostalgia and partially for just how funny it is. This definitely has the most bite of all the films. This was actually initially written with a much darker edge to it, which caused Disney to initially shut down production because they found Woody in particular to be too mean-spirited. But when they rewrote the film, they left some of that edge intact, with the jokes being a little snarky in nature, as well as having some hidden jokes in there that I definitely missed as a kid, but picked up on as I got older. I'll always have a soft spot for this film, and will enjoy it to infinity and beyond. Okay, that was actually really corny. Anyway, so next up is adventure, and the funny thing is, my choices for adventure and sci-fi are actually interchangeable here, especially because a lot of sci-fi movies do involve some sort of adventure, though I think this film definitely plays a little more as an adventure with some sci-fi thrown in there, but it can go either way. And it's actually another movie I picked due to the nostalgia train. Jurassic Park was one of the first truly breathtaking films I was exposed to growing up, and while it's not necessarily a horror movie, it was one of the first films to frighten me growing up. Scenes such as the T-Rex breaking loose, the Velociraptor kitchen scene, Dennis Nedry's encounter with the Dilophosaurus, all send chills up my spine to this day. And one moment that also gives me goosebumps to this day, but in an absolutely good way, is the moment where we first arrive at Jurassic Park, and John Hammond utters those famous lines, and it's accompanied by John Williams' flawless score. It's just a beautiful moment that represents possibilities, both in film and in life in a way. And even though things quickly go south for all of our characters, it's one brief moment that gives this film a very uplifting feel that I absolutely love. Now, while the film's hook is watching dinosaurs terrorize parkgoers, this actually does get a little deeper in its quieter moments, as we see our main characters have debates over ethics and the sanctity of the world's natural order, elevating this just above what could have easily been a dumb, mindless dinosaur movie. So while Steven Spielberg has so many classics to his name that it's almost hard to keep track of, this one remains at the top of my list. Now, I know I mentioned my adventure and sci-fi picks are interchangeable, but we'll come back to sci-fi, as we first need to talk about horror. Now, this is my favorite genre, period. And if you follow my channel for a while, you'll see I watch some pretty bizarre, off-kilter horror films at times. But for all the weird horror films I've seen, my number one choice is actually a much more straightforward film.
Annie, in 1871, women often died in childbirth. But her spirit is the important thing, and Misery's spirit is still alive.
I don't want her spirit! I want her! And you murdered her!
I know Misery isn't always labeled a horror movie, depending on who you ask. It's sometimes classified as just a thriller, but others classify it as a horror movie, and I obviously fall into that camp. Because this movie is absolutely bone-chilling. Because for all the horror movies we've gotten about cults, demons, spirits, ghouls, creatures, and whatever else, Misery is a good reminder of how scary real people can be as well, unfortunately. A lot of what makes this movie so memorable is Kathy Bates' performance as Annie Wilkes, who seamlessly shifts from pleasant and jovial to absolutely psychotic and out of her mind, with a lot of the tension stemming from her unpredictable nature. This is easily one of my favorite performances in a movie ever. Though I also don't want to forget James Caan, who, while not on the same level as Bates, is often forgotten, as he gives his own great performance, trying to appease her ridiculous demands and offset some of her more psychotic episodes. This is an excellent claustrophobic horror movie, with little bits of dark humor thrown in there to help ease some of the tension, and while this isn't known to ever top the list of best Stephen King adaptations, it goes down as my personal favorite. Up next is action, a genre that, for the most part, simply needs to deliver on the action, and 8 to 9 times out of 10, it usually makes a lot of the film's faults somewhat forgivable. I don't mind a good mindless action movie that doesn't have anything to offer in terms of story or character, but my choice here actually has a pretty good story, and definitely some memorable characters.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho.
I've always found Die Hard to be an absolute blast. Not just because it's an action movie, but because it's also an 80s action movie. And 80s action movies are always a lot of fun for the ridiculous one-liners spewed in between moments of absolute carnage. And that's what we get here, with Bruce Willis's running commentary throughout this film being absolutely hard to resist. At least for me, as I got a lot of chuckles from some of the silly things said here. Though of course, between all the ridiculous one-liners and bloody action scenes is a fantastic performance from Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber, bringing us one of the most memorable villains in all of movie history, with his sneering, scene-chewing delivery. The game of cat and mouse between Rickman and Willis is always a lot of fun to watch, and is one that never gets old for me. Now we come back to sci-fi. As I said, you could have switched this with Jurassic Park and put this in the adventure category as well, as it technically does qualify as an adventure movie. Not so much for where our protagonist goes, but when.
If we could somehow harness this lightning, channel it into the flux capacitor, it just might work. Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future.
Back to the Future is another movie that I've grown to love over the years, though I actually didn't grow up with the movie. Funny enough, I think I rode the now long gone ride as a kid at Universal Studios before I actually saw this film. Though when I saw it, I always liked it, I just didn't love it, but it constantly got better with each successive rewatch. It's another movie that I describe as pure fun from start to finish. While a lot of the scenarios are typical fish out of water setups, they work so well thanks to a lighthearted screenplay, memorable quotes, and wonderful delivery from Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, who fit both their roles perfectly. Now, while we've gotten more intricate examinations of time travel in more recent years, Back to the Future is a prime example of keeping things simple but effective. Now, for the next three, we jump back a few decades. This is something I don't get to talk about too often, but as much as I love newer films, I also very much enjoy classic cinema. While some older films don't exactly age all that well, there are plenty that stand the test of time, and that especially goes for my pick for favorite drama.
I feel sorry for you. What it must feel like to want to pull the switch. Ever since you walked into this room, you've been acting like a self-appointed public avenger. You want to see this boy die because you personally want it, not because of the facts. You're a sadist. Get him out! You don't really mean you'll kill me, do you?
You will rarely hear me say this, but 12 Angry Men is a flawless movie. I truly mean that. I wouldn't change a single thing about this film. Every shot, every frame, every line of dialogue is just perfect in my mind. I think what makes this film so special is how it's a dialogue-driven film, all taking place in this one location with just these 12 characters, yet by the way they talk, the way they move around, the way the camera moves around, it feels like an action-driven film, even though it's not. It's a film that's meticulous, yet moves quickly at the same time. It's It's a film that's exciting and thrilling, yet not because of any punches thrown, but just by the way these characters get under one another's skin. While all 12 characters are together for the entirety of the movie, you still have major characters and minor characters, yet everyone, and I mean everyone, gets their time to shine. The performances here are otherworldly, driven by our protagonist, played by Henry Fonda, and our antagonist, played by Lee J. Cobb, though everyone does a fantastic job overall. I know when it comes to older black and white movies, they may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I assure you, this movie isn't dated by any means. It stands up just as well now as it did years ago. So if you haven't seen 12 Angry Men by now, it's certainly worth your time. Next up is romance, and while my choice is older than 12 Angry Men, this actually isn't a black and white movie.
Dame! Who is this dame anyway?
Oh, someone lofty and far above us all. She couldn't learn anything from the movies. She's an actress on the legitimate stage.
Here's one thing I've learned from the movies.
Singin' in the Rain might just be one of the sweetest movies ever made. While the film's reputation is mainly for being one of the greatest musicals ever made, which it definitely is, I even did a Best Musicals video early on in my channel where I mentioned it, the film's romantic side shouldn't be overlooked as well. It's honestly just a delightful experience, driven by some really natural chemistry between stars Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds, who go so well together. They really keep us engaged whenever our attention wasn't focused on the musical numbers, as they managed to easily put a smile on my face anytime they interacted. And while also being very sweet and containing so many memorable songs, it's also just a visual delight, taking place in the 1920s and acting as a tribute to classic Hollywood, with some gorgeous sets and locations filmed in beautiful Technicolor. Plus, it's hilarious, with its breezy, carefree nature giving way to some very lively jokes that still hold up well now. This is another classic Hollywood film that I'd say definitely seek out. And speaking of hilarious, finally we have comedy. And we go even further back here. So, one thing to know about me is I am a big fan of older comedy performers and comedy groups. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, The Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy, and so on. More than anything else from the golden days of Hollywood, I find them to hold up much better than most dramatic films, to be quite honest. Now, I don't know if I have one favorite comedy performer or one favorite comedy group from this era, as they're all wonderful in their own ways, but it's the Marx Brothers who easily have my favorite film of the bunch.
That sort of testimony we can eliminate.
That's fine. I'll take some.
You'll take what?
A lemonade. A nice cold glass of lemonade. Hey, boss, I'm going to good. Yeah.
Gentlemen, Ciccolini here may talk like an idiot and look like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot.
While many of the Marx Brothers films are classics, Duck Soup has always been the one that stuck with me the most. Partially because it was the first movie of theirs that I saw, and therefore the one I've rewatched the most. But it's also due to the fact that it's jam-packed with so many memorable gags. After the first 5 minutes, this film is filled with non-stop puns, quips, and moments of slapstick by all the Marx Brothers. This is a film that goes against many of the things that I talk about when analyzing films, because while this does have a story, and each scene technically has some relevance to the story, most of the time they'll often go off on tangents so that one, two, or all of the Marx Brothers can do some sort of shtick, filled with non sequiturs and absurd throwaway lines nearly every moment. Now, I will concede that there are a few lines here and there that don't exactly age all that well. But for the most part, this film is an absolute blast to watch. It's one of the funniest films I've ever seen, and it always manages to put a smile on my face. Alright, now that we've gone through the list, it's time to tag some other channels to take on the challenge. Now, you can do up to 7, but most people I know on here actually have already done it or have been tagged. So I'm just going to tag 3 channels. And if you hear your name and don't want to do this, no pressure. This is just meant to be fun, so don't sweat it if you don't want to do it. First up is Rio's Positive POV, and he is a great guy. His reviews are very to the point, and he always provides some great commentary on films. He does a lot of new releases, as well as older films, as well as some fun movie rankings, so go check him out. Next up is JJ Boot Movies, and his channel is a lot of fun. If you like trailer reactions, his channel is the place to be, as he does a lot of those, in addition to reviews and Blu-ray hauls. And last but not least is Zach Goller. He's a really down-to-earth dude, and his channel is absolutely great. He does reviews of newer films, Blu-ray hauls, wrestling, and he's currently reviewing all of the MCU films. Go support all of them. I'll leave a link to all of their channels in the description. They've been incredibly supportive of me, so please make sure to check them out and subscribe to them. And if you decide to do the challenge, I'm looking forward to your lists. But in the meantime, for the rest of you, let me know, have you seen all the movies I listed here? Have you missed out on any of them? Did you like whatever ones you did see? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.